If living in Texas has taught me one thing, it's that we've got a lot of oak trees. Live oak is one of the most, if not the most common tree in the state. And the special thing about these trees is that they live for a very long time. According to Tree Newell, trees can live for over 300 years or more in exceptional cases. And right now, I'm standing in front of the century tree, an approximately 100-year-old tree that lives in the academic plaza of Texas A&M University. This tree is an integral part of the school's legacy, as it was one of the first trees planted on the campus. And legend has it that if a couple walks under the tree, they'll get married, and if a person walks under it alone, they'll be alone forever. Because trees like the century tree live for a very long time, they are able to witness hundreds of years worth of history. They are living beings that hold so much wisdom and connection to the ancestry of the land. And there are so many trees just like this one that hold the stories of the people that came before us. I sat down with National Geographic explorer Dr. Alicia Odewale to talk about her Black Heritage Tree Project, which aims to create the first global Black Heritage Tree map in collaboration with descendants communities, historians, and forestry experts. She was able to share her story on how she was able to become the first person of color to graduate with a PhD in her field in her university. So without further ado, my name is Latifa Adesina, and you're listening to the Texplorers podcast. Okay, so my first question, I want to talk to you about your high school. So you went to a high school that was historically separated for Black students, and I wanted to talk to you about that experience. Do you think that the high school that you went to influenced your path going forward in terms of wanting to be an archaeologist?
I think so. The high school I went to in my hometown of Tulsa, Oklahoma, is Booker T. Washington High School. And exactly what you said, this school was set up in 1913, and this was designed for Black students in the what is the now historic district of Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I think this set me up well to actually go into this field of archaeology, because this school actually offered something called Latin as a foreign language. So I was able to study Latin and Greek history and language, and this is already in high school. Usually, folks don't get introduced to that until like the college level. But at this school, this historically Black high school, we were able to learn quite a few things in addition to like AP and IB world history and all these other subjects, to be able to explore not only language but memory, and the concept of memories in the brain was something I was really interested in addition to Latin. Uh, but I kept being really frustrated and getting like increasingly angry by the fact that these epic stories, these epic mythology scenarios that are being shared with us in Latin class, they all seem to be these very white marble statue figures. And never did I ever see someone who looked like me in these epic stories of heroes and gods and goddesses. So I was really, really interested in learning more about how do you actually get into the history of my people, and back time, the deep past, the idea of an ancient society of people who look like me was something I was exploring in high school, but I had to kind of learn on my own. And then when I got to actually finishing my high school degree, I then had to look for a space where I could explore the classical studies and explore like an African diaspora side to it at the same time. And my teachers were completely supportive of this. So I think that being in this space where you were free to dream and free to explore all these different really like niche and unique topics was something I couldn't get at another school. But at Booker T, it was encouraged.
Yeah, and do you still speak Latin? Do you remember anything
Oh God, you're
from
gonna put
Latin
me on
class?
the spot.
Sorry.
So I have lost most of my Latin translation skills. I used to be quite good, but
Ooh.
we actually did like an academic bowl for Latin. I forgot what we
Oh,
called
that's
it,
so
but yeah,
cool. Oh
so we
my
would actually
gosh.
compete with the local schools. But I remember like the main thing I remember for like our final exam, we had to actually do an oration, and I had to do an oration of the Aeneid. Uh, so that's like the only thing I remember is the thing that was drilled into me to actually
Crazy.
perform in front of the class. But yeah,
Wow. Honestly, like people always say that Latin's like a dead language, but back in the day, Latin used to be that girl. Like
for
everyone spoke
sure,
Latin. The Bible,
for
I'm pretty
sure.
sure, was in Latin, and she's nowhere to be found. But given that you were born and raised in Tulsa, you also shared that your family has some connection to the Tulsa massacre. Did that also influence you to pursue your path and connecting back into that history and becoming an archaeologist?
You know what? Funny story. If you had asked me maybe 5 years ago if I had family connected to the Tulsa Race Massacre at all, I would have told you no, because I had no idea until I actually started researching into this in 2021. So this was during the centennial year of the Tulsa Race Massacre before I ever knew any connections to our family at all. So in high school, I certainly didn't have a clue. And my only knowledge was our family came from Tennessee and Alabama. And that was my framework, my foundation of where I thought I came from. But learning more about our family history as an adult, I was able to actually trace back, and we have a one specifically. This gentleman, his name is Robert Ware. At 12 years old, he was born in Tennessee, where the rest of my family is, born in Tennessee, but then made his way as the eldest child to Greenwood to get an education. So he was actually at Dunbar grade school at the age of 12, and that's actually the school that fed into Booker T, where I would attend, decades later. But that was kind of a common practice, especially among Black families, to choose one child to travel to get the best education they can. And for our family, they chose Greenwood. And so he came to Greenwood in actually 1920. I have a record of him on the census in 1920.
Oh, that's
And
amazing.
I know.
That's amazing.
But the only reason I know he survived the Tulsa Race Massacre after 1920 is because we have a World War II draft card for him in 1945. And on that draft card, it actually says where you have, if there's any distinguishing markers on this individual's body. And on that card, it's listed that both of his hands are burned. Typically, you'll see like one hand being burned. Typically, not both hands are burned if there's an accidental cause or something. But our family discussions around this have been in possibly trying to save the grandparents that he was living with, that both of his hands are burned in the process. So we are still trying to figure this out and trying to piece together these clues ourselves all these years later. But I've been able to find quite a few. And I would say, actually, no, a lot of these ancestors have found me after I started doing this archaeological research as well into my adult big 30s that I was able to, look into this and find a piece of myself that I didn't even know was there.
Yeah, I think it's really important that African Americans and Black Americans understand like and like find their roots because obviously with slavery and segregation and Jim Crow, part of the oppression and part of the dehumanization was detaching us from our roots, and
Hmm.
part of that was like not being able to speak our own language, not being
Right.
able to braid our hairs in certain ways. So I think like going back and finding your roots and learning the connections that you have with your land, with your hometown is really important, especially because for me personally, I'm a child of immigrants, so I always think about like what it would be like if I were to be born and raised in my home country, in my motherland. But yeah, that's something I always think about whenever I hear stories of people finding their ancestors, finding where they're coming from. And yeah, but going to undergrad, so in high school, you wanted to learn more about Black mythology, Black history. Did that continue to stay? Was that interest prominent in undergrad, or did you wander? Did you want to venture into other things? What did your undergrad career look like?
So when I got to my undergraduate school, which was Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri, this is in the middle of nowhere, Missouri, small liberal arts school. I got a full scholarship to attend this school, so that's why I went. My dream school was actually Spelman, and I got into Spelman, but I didn't
Everyone's
get
dream
the.
school is Spelman. Everyone's that's
I'll tell
everyone's
you,
dream school.
my bags were packed for Spelman, but I didn't get the financial aid package that I needed to be able to attend Spelman,
Mhm.
even though I got in. But I made the choice to go where I could actually attend and afford to be educated in this space.
Relatable. Relatable.
So when I stepped on Westminster's campus, I know I wanted to major in classical studies, so I did
Mhm.
major in classical studies. But then I picked up a double major in psychology because I was told that Black folks don't speak Latin and Black folks don't do this and that. So I was told to choose a major that was sensible, choose a major that I could get a job in, choose a major that uh, people who look like me could actually, find a job. So I did that. I majored in psychology and classical studies. So I always had a passion for these classical studies and an interest in the deep past, ancient history. But then I had the sensible sort of backup on the side of that. So that was my high school, my undergraduate experience was really trying to hide a lot of my passions that were seen as weird, especially as a Black woman, and then leaning into the psychology and in studying memory, studying especially how memories form and how memories change, especially how collective memories, how people remember events in history and time, was really fascinating to me. But I was kind of trying to hide the the Latin stuff because I was learning more and more like this was not acceptable for young Black folks to be doing. But I think once I got to, and I'd never met a Black archaeologist in my entire life until I got to graduate school. I'm
Mhm.
talking doctoral program, not even
Mm.
master's, doctoral program
Yeah.
that I had met another archaeologist of color. So I didn't even think that was a possible like career choice, a pathway. I didn't even know that was something that I could do until I got to graduate school. So I think undergrad was really about me trying to figure out where my passions were and trying to figure out how to move through the world as a Black woman who had these really weird interests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's so relatable because as an undergraduate, like it's the importance of like finding a job that pays well is like
Yes.
very
There's
pronounced.
pressure.
And as a Black woman, and again as a child of
And
immigrants,
child of immigrants,
it's
very important.
really it's when I remember telling my parents that I wanted to major, I think it was performance studies, and they were so against
Mm.
it because they didn't think that
Oh,
there was like any like
yeah.
financial gain in that.
Yeah.
And then like I fought and fought and fought, and finally they were like, okay, you can major in communications. So like it honestly is like having like weird interests and
Yes.
wanting to like find your niche in a field where there aren't people like you and me.
Yeah.
There could be a lot of pushback within your own communities too.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
it's kind of, you just kind of have to like find your niche and just like
Hmm.
focus on it, and then like find what you're passionate about, and hopefully
Yeah.
everything will work out. But I wanted
Yeah.
to touch upon the fact that you are the first person of color to have a master's and a PhD in your field for your university.
Yes, that is
That's
true.
amazing. Tell me about that experience. What challenges or what hardships, what were the most thought provoking memories during your time as a graduate student?
Oh gosh. Okay. You want the real
I
story
want the
or
tea. I want the tea. That's what I want.
so I started my master's degree in museum science and management, We're at the
Hmm.
University of Tulsa. So I came back to my hometown. Westminster is in Missouri. So I came back to my hometown for my master's. And I was studying museums because I wanted to become a museum director. Like, that was my dream, to be a museum director or a museum curator. Like, I was dabbling between the two. But you know what I found? I found it quite impossible to get a job as a Black woman in a museum, especially at the curator or director level. So even though I had a whole master's degree in this field, I could not find a space that was willing to hire a Black woman to lead curation, to lead exhibits, to lead a museum organization. Yeah, so I actually started working at Saks Fifth Avenue, random, to pay the bills while I was after I finished my master's degree in museums, and I ended up applying for the PhD program in anthropology at the same school at the University of Tulsa, because I thought if I got a PhD, maybe that would give me a leg up in the market. Maybe that would give me a way to break into this museum space and actually find a job. Whew. So here's where the real challenges started.
I'm ready. Give it to me.
Because if you say you want a PhD, the question is, how bad do you want it? It's not about how smart you are.
Hmm.
It's not about, you have to be a genius to get a PhD. How bad do you actually want it? Because this is where my greatest challenges happened in my life, for sure. I should pause and say that during the master's program, I met my husband at the same school at the University of Tulsa. We both graduated together. He was in chemical engineering. I was in museum science. So that was a beautiful thing that came out of that school experience. But when I started the PhD program, let's start with the admission process. I applied. And now, mind you, I'm at the same school. I just finished from the exact same school with a
Hmm.
master's.
Hmm.
They decided to only admit me probationally because
Wait,
they
can you
felt,
explain what probationally means?
yeah, let's talk about it.
Talk about it.
So they decided to admit me only on the basis that there was this assumption that my background, my training, my level of education was not up to standard of the rest of the students that were being admitted into the program. So I was forced to take what was called leveling classes at the undergraduate level for a year before I could start any of my PhD coursework, because it was assumed that I needed to prove I could be successful in this program before I could even start the program. And the only
Crazy.
difference between me and these other students is that I went to a master's. My master's is from TU, so I'm applying to
Hmm.
a TU PhD program,
Hmm.
and I also am the only person of color in this cohort.
Go
So,
figure.
so you tell me why I was assumed to be the one that needed the extra year of undergraduate training before I could even start the PhD. Now,
And I have a question. Were there other students that were applying for PhD who had a master's from TU but had an undergraduate degree somewhere else?
so I think, yes, we did have some other folks who had a master's degree, but they were all from the anthropology program. So masters
Oh, okay.
in anthropology. So because I came from museum science, even though I was taking the same classes with these other anthro students, because they were all
Hmm.
cross-listed
Yeah.
classes. It's a pretty small school, so it's not like we were in a whole different department. Like, we're all museum studies was like couched in
Yeah.
anthropology.
I
So
get it.
none of that made sense. So
Hmm.
I was taking like intro to anthropology, intro to archaeology classes, all these intro classes. And then, funny thing happened. I actually ended up graduating first out of everyone in the cohort.
How did that happen?
Exactly.
How
I
did that
started
happen?
behind I started behind everybody, and I ended up going through the coursework, and I took as many classes as I could to get through as fast as I could because that
Mhm.
costed money.
Mhm.
And I got a fellowship, the Bellwether Fellowship at the university, and then I got an NSF grant. And that
Dang.
grant helped me fund the entire final year of my work. And then I used that as my uninterrupted writing time. So I didn't have to have an assistantship or anything. I was on a fellowship at that point. And I finished writing, turned that in, defended my work, and ended up being the first one out of that program after having been held back for a year, basically.
Mhm.
And that's nothing but God.
Yeah.
So I was able to somehow finish. And so technically, I'm not like just the first, black woman to finish with this degree. I'm the first person in history, period, to finish that degree. But that's after a lot of challenges and having a whole baby. I had a baby in graduate school.
Oh my god.
So that was another reason why they thought I wasn't going to finish. They thought I was not going to be
Oh.
successful. Uh, but
Oh.
this was like after I was already admitted. After I was already
Mhm.
admitted, this was like this was in 2013 that I had, no, yeah, 2013 that I had my first child. So this was when I was finishing my PhD coursework, about to actually start my comps and starting to do research. So they didn't think I was going to even finish the coursework, let alone finish the research portion of the work. But, when you have a child that really completely reorganizes your priorities and gives you a different reason of like why you're doing something. So I say that my child was my like catapult into finishing this thing because I had somebody else watching me at that point and somebody else I needed to do this for. So it really helped me, I think, get over the finish line.
Yeah, and also, I'm the youngest of 5. My
Wow.
mom has like 5 degrees, 2 being
Whoa.
masters and 1 being PhD. When she was doing her masters when she had me. So I was
Wow.
a baby, and when I was older she would tell me how like whenever I was younger I would play with the computer and delete all of her work. Um
Oh no.
yeah, and then and then finally I think in 2016 she started her PhD and she finally
Wow.
finished in 2022. So it took her 6 years to do her PhD. So when you
Wow.
were saying like how bad do you actually want it, I can understand when she finally defended her dissertation. She was so happy. I genuinely thought somebody died. Like I thought something really bad happened. I was like, "What happened?" And she was like, "I defended my dissertation." I was like, "Oh wow, that's great." But I thought somebody died. So I from a second from like secondhand I can understand like how hard it is to
Yeah,
be a mother of 5, be a mother at all, raising a child and doing your PhD. It's really hard and difficult, and the fact that you were
that
able to finish before your peers being held back for a year is utterly amazing, and God
I
did.
I tell
God
you
really
what,
did.
it was just the grace because there's no reason why after being held back, after having a baby, everything that happened to me in the archaeology space, like we haven't even gotten to all the trauma in field schools and stuff, but that's a whole different podcast. But we had but somehow, some way, I was able to get out of there with my sanity intact, and I thank
Mm.
God every day.
Yeah. So
Uh,
for undergrad, you double majored in the classics and psychology. For your
yes,
master's, it was museum science. And then for your PhD, it was anthropology.
yes.
So I guess my question is now, why archaeology?
Good question. Because I remember I was trying to be a museum curator, museum director. That was my big dream.
Mhm.
In still some ways that dream is still there. But one thing that really bothered me, also, not being able to find a job, but one thing that really bothered me was that by the time a lot of these artifacts, cultural materials, even structures are getting into the museum space or if entering into these exhibits, it's up to somebody, like someone else has already decided its interpretation. Someone else has already decided what that object means. and where it came from and all of its provenience. And one thing I was really sort of leaning into was the question of, what if someone was there at the start of this, when it came out of the ground, and had a different interpretation, a different question, a different way of understanding that materiality being from that space or being ancestrally connected in a different way, that you have a whole different outlook. And then by the time it gets to the museum exhibit, it has a whole different connotation because of who was actually part of the work to bring it out of the ground in the first place. So I began sort of dabbling in the archaeology space more and more. The more I got frustrated with the end product of how museums were displaying, interpreting, educating, and sharing the interpretation of artifacts and stories that just seem like it's being taken, looted, stolen from other cultures.
Mm-hmm.
The killmonger of it all. So that led me, I think, into archaeology more and more because I felt like I could make a better impact, a better change, a better, more positive and more empowering like career choice for myself if I was at the beginning of this process instead of at the end. But that's not to knock any person who's, of course, working in museums, because I still desire to be in both spaces. I still actually have work that I do in both spaces, within museums and within classrooms and within, in the field. But I think that we actually need an overhaul throughout the entire pipeline of how wait, let's start with how we choose which sites to investigate, which sites have been determined to be worthy of preservation, worthy of investigation, and then who's actually doing the work, who are the practitioners doing that work, and what are their questions, what are their conclusions, what results are they coming to, and then how is that interpreted to the community and then to our museums and public institutions who are educating the next generation. There needs to be an overhaul through the entire system. But until we get there, until we can completely decolonize this whole thing, I think it's, a few of us who are chosen to infiltrate in certain spaces to try to disrupt the patterns that we're seeing. So I think that's what led me into archaeology, that kind of lured me away from where I was situated in the museum studies field.
Yeah, and I'm gonna ask you a controversial question. You touched on it a
Oh.
little bit, but how do you feel about, I guess, museums having artifacts from different countries and a lot of it, some of it being stolen? The British Museum, I know for a fact, has a lot of stolen
Mm-hmm.
artifacts
Mm-hmm.
from all over Africa. I think Queen Elizabeth,
Mm-hmm.
rest in peace,
Yeah.
has a blood diamond from India, and they've been begging
Yeah.
for that back. How do you feel
Yeah.
about like the crossroads between having artifacts presented to the public versus giving those artifacts back to its original owner?
That's a good question. And one that is definitely controversial, but not for me, because I think, I think as institutions, as cultural institutions, as museums are, they have a responsibility to steward their collection. They have a responsibility to understand and know the provenience of everything in their holdings, in their collections. And if you have things that are stolen, if you have things that were taken from another community, another culture, another society, it is your responsibility to return it, to repatriate it. And you should be actually leading the steps to repatriate that material instead of waiting for someone to beg you for it. For example, the Benin bronzes that are being returned to Nigeria finally, uh,
Finally.
they are forcing them to pay for these
Mm-hmm.
materials to get their own cultural patrimony back. They're being forced to pay for it. And then it's really up to, I think, the British Museum standards of, it has to be, curated at a certain space, all these different levels of, requirements for them to actually return it in the first place. And that, again, who gets to decide how something is cared for? And who decides they know what's best for these objects and for this material. And yeah, it's incredibly frustrating for me
Mm, I can
that
imagine.
other people have just decided that they are the arbiters of the best standards of the entire world in terms of cultural preservation, and they get to dictate how these things are done, ignoring how someone's community, someone's culture might value differently how things are being cared for and how things are being stored or how things are being on display. Yeah, it's a real problem that we don't see the same shared governance or same equity in terms of standards, that people can decide for themselves how their own cultural materials should be cared for. And that's a big problem. But I think we have a lot more folks in positions of power all over the continent of Africa, all over the continent of well, of course Europe, but we need a lot more, I would say, people that have knowingly taken things and have either now since died or retired to re-examine these collections and actually take an inventory and repatriate things back to where they came from. The biggest issue is that we don't have the same level of federal protections as, say, people of federal tribes, federally recognized tribes have through the NAGPRA law. We don't have a black NAGPRA yet. So we need
Wait,
to
what is
have
the Nagba law? Can you explain that?
NAGPRA is the Native Americans
Oh.
Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. It was passed in 1990, and this was after the American Indian movement. There was a lot of unrest. This was during the Civil Rights Movement, actually. Like right after the Civil Rights Movement, right after the Black Power movement, there's a lot of indigenous fighting for rights at the same time. And in 1990, when this was passed, this made it illegal really to be out there looting for indigenous spaces, especially burial spaces, sacred spaces, and funerary goods, sacred objects. So it gave a sense of empowerment, power to be able to control what's happening with their ancestral remains, but also the sacred objects connected to their tribes. But we don't have the same level of protection for Black spaces, for Black objects. So that is still something we're fighting for. That's still something we have to really try to like force people to like do right by us when there's no federal law saying they have to do something a certain way. But the future's bright, and I know that people are lobbying for. There's a Burial Grounds Act for Black burial spaces, at least for African American burial grounds. But I think we're still lobbying for like a Black version of NAGPRA to
Mm.
exist.
Yeah, and a lot of our viewers are young. This podcast is for high school students, maybe even
Huh.
middle school students.
Oh.
And what would you say to high school students that maybe look like you or me, that have a passion for the arts, want to do something creative, want to tell stories about their ancestry, but are getting the same messages that you and me had gotten during our
Mhm.
undergrad and
Mhm.
high school? What would you say to that student? What advice would you give?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would tell them, one, Black people are not a monolith. So if people tell you that, Black people don't do this, Black people aren't in archaeology. There's no such thing as a Black archaeologist. There's no such thing as a Black, I don't know, scuba diver. Whatever you want to do in your life, don't limit yourself because of your race. Like, even if your own family is telling you, like, we don't do certain things, don't put yourself in a box. We are a beautiful people that is incredibly diverse, and there is so many skills and passions and talents that somebody put inside of you to express. So explore that fully, and don't let anyone tell you that something about you would keep you from being successful in that area.
Perfect. Okay, let's talk about your Black Heritage Trees project.
Oh,
I
I
think
love this project.
I think it's one of the most meaningful and coolest thing I've ever seen. Can you? But I don't want to speak for you. I want you to tell me from the beginning. I want you to give me the tea. What
Okay.
made you? What inspired you to go forth with this project?
Oh gosh. So I've been dreaming about this project for at least 6 years since I started working in the Caribbean. So this was way back, actually during undergrad, during my PhD program. The first time I actually met another Black archaeologist was through something called SBA, the Society of Black Archaeologists, which is a lovely organization that students should check out, with Black archaeologists all over the world that have come together into one organization. But we were doing research in the Caribbean, in St. Croix, in the Virgin Islands, and on St. Croix they have these things called spirit trees, or sometimes called jumbie trees. And these trees are like guardians of culture. They are living entities within themselves that you can talk to, that you connect with, that uh, you are beholden to in a different way than how we see trees typically, stateside. And that was something I had never seen before. I never even encountered that before as someone who grew up in Oklahoma. So, learning about this whole other world and how people see trees, how Black people see trees in St. Croix, gave me an idea of, I'm missing something. And what if there were spirit trees in my own community that I've just been walking past and haven't been paying attention to? But they have stories, they have histories, they have a way to hold memory that we as people don't, because we don't live as long as these trees do. So this project came out of a lot of questions I was asking around trees. And now I've got a team of 20 people who are all, we're all locking arms to answer the same question of, what do these trees have to tell us about Black history that we've been missing? And a lot of these trees that we're investigating, they are in spaces of Black freedom, Black liberation. So in St. Croix, we're looking at trees that were there to witness the moment that freedom was taken by force, July 3rd, 1848. It's only in Haiti, in St. Croix, where permanent legalized freedom was taken by force. And these trees were there to witness that moment. And we have trees that were in Greenwood, in Tulsa, during the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. But they were also around in 1907 when Oklahoma became a state in the first place. And when actually during the campaign for Oklahoma to become a Black state, a free Black state. But there's a lot of really interesting ideas and thinking of the trees that were there to witness those moments and what they can tell us. And that's what this project is all about. So we've got 4 different sites that we're looking into in Tulsa, in Greenwood, in Houston, in Galveston, and then in St. Croix, because all 4 of these communities can tell us something different about Black freedom. A lot of people only know Black freedom as in Juneteenth, but there's so many other freedom stories that we have yet to really explore deeply. And the trees that were there to witness those moments as silent witnesses to the past are centered, and they get a chance to shine and get to tell their stories.
Yeah, and honestly, if trees could talk, like what would they say? I mean,
Oh,
like
yeah.
we have and we have something called the century tree. It's like an 100-year
Mm,
old tree,
yeah.
and it's like a deep rooted part into the Aggie tradition. And it's crazy to think that when the tree was planted, I couldn't attend that university. You
Mm,
know,
yeah.
so when I
Yeah.
stumbled upon your this project, one thing I was thinking about was like this project is centered around what stories can these trees tell us.
Hmm.
And I think it's really important that storytelling be used as a mode for connecting back to our history. That's why we have
Absolutely.
songs. That's why we have books. That's why we have movies. It's a really
Yes.
important tool for us to connect with who we are. So, in what ways do you use storytelling in your projects, in your research, to spread your message to the masses?
Oh, that's a good question. And I do want to pause and say thank you to National Geographic Society for funding this work.
Of course.
Shameless plug. But yeah, they gave us a Meridian grant for
Hmm.
this project. And so it is a land based storytelling initiative. And so what that means for us is that we have a connection to specific descendant communities that we're working with. And then we have really a storytelling initiative anchored in place. And a lot of these black towns that we're actually researching, these predominantly black spaces, they're anchored by these trees, by these old ancestral historic trees. And for a lot of our community members, especially when we're talking about in Oklahoma, there were at least 50 all black towns at one point, but now we're left with 13 that are remaining as active and incorporated towns. Uh, but what about the other, 37 that are so called lost? This project is a way to actually reclaim some of those spaces because most of those towns don't have standing structures. They don't have um, any modern day residents that are occupying those spaces. They may only have trees left, and there's still a way to tell those stories. There's still a way to go back and reclaim that heritage. So give that the way that we're using storytelling is really to reclaim space, reclaim heritage, reclaim really the ownership of the story. Even if your town, your space has been considered lost or a ghost town, I personally believe that there's no such thing as a lost black town. There's no such thing as a town dying if there's still a witness there. If the rocks are crying out
Hmm.
and there's still things residing underground, all we need are the right tools to go back and get it.
Right. Yeah, and I think so. I knew about the Meridian Project. That was actually my next question.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so National Geographic. I think like out of I think only 10 projects got this Meridian grant out of a
Yes.
plethora. So
Yes.
I think National Geographic really understands the importance of like having the story being told because you can do the research, you can have all of these like credentials, but it's kind of like one of those things where it's like if a tree falls in the forest and nobody was around to hear it, did it actually happen? It's
Hmm.
unfortunately like if people aren't around to see it, not many people are going to believe it or know about it. So I
Yeah,
really think it's important that people use storytelling and have a way to push out your research or your stories to the public so people actually know what's going on. And I actually
absolutely.
wanted to talk about so you are a Beyonce fan. And the fun fact about Beyonce is that she's Estonian as well as me. So we're both
Oh,
Estonians. So
oh,
we're basically
nice.
sisters. We're basically related in my mind. And
Right, right.
you went to the Cowboy Carter tour
I
and
did.
you have been talking about
Oh my
like black
gosh.
cowboys and like
Yes,
their heritage and their stories. So can you shed some light on this project and this topic? Because it
sure.
is relevant because she's still on tour now. So for anyone who's
Right.
going to the Cowboy Carter tour, yeah.
I think she just wrapped up. So July 26th, I think, was the last day of the Cowboy Carter tour. She
Oh,
ended
is
in
that why Destiny's Child was there?
yes.
Oh,
So that
okay.
Las Vegas was the last stop, which
Okay.
is also I mean July 26th is the birth date of Betty Black
Mm.
and Betty Davis. And that is that's something that's significant, of course, for Beyonce's tour experience, but that's also why people think Act 3 is a rock album. But but to bring this back to why I'm interested, I actually led a class called "Before Cowboy Carter: Black Towns, Black Freedom." Yeah, and in that class, we got to talk about all these Black contributions to the American West, and really the erasure of Black people from the American West, and in country music, and in all these different spaces. So I loved teaching that class. It's one of my favorite classes to teach, and that was at the University of Houston. But now we're actually going to use that as a master class. National Geographic has actually decided to make that class experience, a live virtual, sorry, a live touring experience, a master class that's going to tour around the country starting in September of this year. So I'm very, very excited. So talking about Black cowboys, Black people in the West, this is one of my passions. Of course, being from Oklahoma, being someone who was raised going to rodeos every summer, I'm actually going back home to Tulsa for the LeBlanc Invitational Rodeo next weekend. So I'm extremely excited. I already got my nails done and everything for the rodeo. But this is like, I think something that, again, connecting to your people, connecting to where you're from, like being born and raised in Oklahoma. And if you're from Houston, you know the Houston Rodeo is a
Mm,
central part of your existence.
yes. I'm there every spring, every March.
But people up north, a lot of Black people that are up north, they've never seen Black people on horseback. They've never seen, these
Mhm.
giant rodeo events where there's just a sea of Black people in cowboy hats. And it's like stepping into a whole different world, but a world you were meant to be in. So I love it. I love, love, love it. So I love Beyonce. I love Cowboy Carter, but getting to teach this class, getting connected to students, and getting to go on the road with my research, it's really a connection between Black towns and Black cowboys together that led me here, and of course my upbringing.
Oh, of course. No, we're both from the South, and being from Texas, I'm sure somebody up north, if I were to tell them, picture a person from Texas, I'm probably not what they're going to picture.
Right.
So I think it's really important that people recognize that Black people existed in all of these things that, like, Black cowboys, rock, pop. Like,
Hmm.
we are the inventors of so many things, and we have been pushed out of
Absolutely.
all of these communities. And I think your work with your tour and Black heritage trees has been really highlighting just how important and just how much we have done for the cultural zeitgeist of the United States. I mean, we are the blueprint. Sorry, not sorry.
Absolutely.
But we have been talking for almost an hour.
Oh, okay.
This was a really insightful conversation, a really meaningful conversation, and I'm really glad that we were able to talk and make this happen.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak. I do want to say a thank you to my family for encouraging my weird interests
Hmm.
that led me here. But I also want to say thank you, National Geographic. Thank you to my students who rolled the dice on taking this class with me, and to everyone who's collaborating with me on the Black Heritage Tree Project. There's a lot of folks that I wish I could name, but like I said, there's a team of 20, so we don't have time to give all the names, but they are fantastic scholars, historians, educators, forestry experts, other archaeologists, a lot of folks who are locking arms on this. So I appreciate each and every one of them.
Hmm. And again, if you haven't seen the Black Heritage Trees, I will plug everything below wherever this is going to be
Yes,
posted.
check us out. We
Um,
have a website, we have social media, Facebook, Instagram,
mhm,
and YouTube as well.
and
Black Heritage
YouTube.
Trees.
So you have no excuse. But
Come
yeah,
check it
thank
out.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll see y'all in the next one.